Today in Australia, Laperouse's memory lives on. Every year, Mass is held to celebrate the life of Père Receveur, who died from wounds received in Samoa and who is buried here.
Allow me to add my welcome to each one of you for this very special occasion in which we remember Père Receveur, the French community and all who have sailed to our land. Laperouse and his exploration team, including the young Père Receveur, took a huge risk, all in the name of discovery.
Longing for light, we wait in darkness, longing for truth, we turn to you. Place us your own, your holy people, long for the world to see. Christ be our light, shine in our hearts, shine through the dawn.
Father Receveur's probably the first non-Indigenous person buried on Australian soil. So it's very important to the French community and to the Catholic community. But it's also a reminder of just how much history we have here in Laperouse. We take it for granted, I think, too much. If this is the birthplace of European Australia, there's a great story to tell around here of Aboriginal people and their survival here for 50,000 years. But our young European history is well represented here, and the Friends of Laperouse Museum do a terrific job making sure we never forget just how important this area is to all of Australia, really.
Père Receveur being the first Catholic to set foot on Australian soil, Père Receveur being the first priest to be buried in Australian soil, and sadly to be the first person for whom the funeral rites were celebrated on Australian soil. That would be a certain significance for him. So Catholics would venerate him as a significant person in our heritage and our history.
In the days of Receveur, Franciscans were more than just priests or brothers. To have been invited to join the fleet that came out here with Laperouse, he was so much more. He was a botanist. He knew science. He was a learned man. Now, we don't know where he studied, but it's possible that he would have studied at the University of Paris, like most of the Franciscans did. So being on board, as well as an ecologist and a naturalist and a botanist, he also brought the priestly ministries as well. So he was able to minister to the people who were on board the ship, as well as participate in the scientific processes that were going on. So it's more that he lived rather than what he died that he brought. The reason for the actual commemoration is two reasons. First, we believe that this is the site where the very first Roman Catholic Mass was held on Australian, or what we call Australian soil. The Indigenous people were there at the time, of course, and had their own traditions, but in terms of the Roman Catholic tradition, the very first Mass, we believe, was held here on this site, or somewhere around here. We also believe that we have the tree stump that was used as an altar. That was in Australia, it's now in France, and one day we hope it'll return to its home here. The other reason that we celebrate here is because he's buried here. And for the French, for the Roman Catholics, and for all those who look forward to a time where there will be peace between the Indigenous people, and there was hope, and those who came to visit, this should be a rallying point. It really should be, I think. I think this is one of the most understated sites in all of Australia in terms of importance to our national history. Of that I'm absolutely certain. You are looking at the first marked grave of somebody who is not an Indigenous person. That in itself is quite amazing, that they saw it important enough to not only bury him, but to bury him and to mark the spot. So in terms of our living, coming, dying cycle, this spot is sacred. Secondly, in terms of the Christian tradition, not only the Catholic tradition, and now the those that came out with those, from England may well have prayed, and we don't know, but we know with absolute certainty that a Eucharist was held on this site. The altar stone, we have that. It's written, it's documented. So in terms of the birth of the scientific movement, the theological movement, and the interaction with the earth in terms of the Aboriginal inhabitants, this site is all here. And yet nobody knows about it. We need to tell the story.
That one would assume that whoever checked Receveur over after he got back to the ship would have looked for a depressed fracture of the skull, but given that he could have had this slowly accumulating hematoma, and putting pressure on certain parts of his brain, and maybe depriving certain parts of the brain of blood. We don't know, of course, we don't have any clinical notes of vomiting and severe headaches. But back to the issue of what he wrote to his brother, well, clearly he wanted to allay the concerns of his family that, okay, he's been wounded, but I'll be right, mate.
So what does he die of? If the wounds he had suffered had become infected, you wouldn't say everything's fine. Oh, well, I'm okay, yes, I know all this is all falling to pieces, but so it is mysterious, and I don't know what the answer is.